is Wednesday, March 26, 2025, and it's 11:30, and we're here to review the Memorandum of Understanding for Lead Charities. Just to recap what's happened prior, Carol Young and Dan Martinson from P&Z brought forward this MOU on February 20th, 2025. The board tabled it for legal review, and we all had time to go review the property in question. I know the board has questions and concerns, and we have the public here as well. So what I'm going to do is hold the public comment till the end. We'll have Dan go ahead and present the MOU, and then the board will question, and then we'll have public comment. And if you would limit your comment to 2 minutes. We'll go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Dan Martinson, Administrator, for the record. As Jeff said, we were posed with an opportunity to use LEAP Housing as an entity to look at a project for multifamily housing in the Valley. We've worked with LEAP on various projects in other places, and certainly LEAP has done projects throughout the state as well. On the phone, we have Holly Miller, who is the project representative for LEAP Housing, and we're hopeful that she might be able to shed some light on some other questions that may be had of what this particular question is today and what the project might entail. As Jeff said, we get into these projects where we look for properties throughout a community to coordinate LEAP's opportunity to use various federal and state grants to provide subsidies for the construction of multifamily housing. And that can come in many shapes or forms. And I'll let Holly speak to some examples, but in greater sense, many of the grants that they use are available to different taxing districts like school districts, fire districts, water sewer districts, in particular counties and cities, as government entities can help participate. And a large part of the subsidy comes in the ability for that entity to retain the ownership of the land, and that allows for this group to come in and be able to construct the project on it, and then keep it at a reasonable cost per square foot so that rents and available housing is indeed affordable. There's also many ways to structure that scenario and that agreement for the particular use of that structure and for the particular rents to be held to a certain status so that they do retain their affordable housing status. So with that, we worked with this group to identify numerous properties throughout the county, coinciding with my directive as planning administrator from the board to look at all the properties that the county owns and be looking at and be wary of opportunities to make better use of that property, whatever that shape or form comes in. And so in this case, we looked at a handful of properties and narrowed it to this one to focus the energy on. In a rough sense, this property was big enough, had utilities available enough, was central to people being able to use it, central to travel, transportation, and in proximity. Putting a facility way up in North Fork or way up to Joe doesn't necessarily make sense for this kind of project. So we narrowed it to this one, and then the process is to request a memorandum of understanding, which is simply an understanding, not a contract, to go do the feasibility study on this property to determine if it's feasible to do a project on this type of property in this particular location. And that's where they're going to analyze the demographics, they're going to analyze a whole host of things, and I think Holly might be able to speak to that in more detail. But we're also looking at it from a construction standpoint and the developability project in sewer, water access, flat ground versus hillside ground, all go to the per square foot cost that ultimately ends up being in that structure. As we know in our community, that is probably our primary focus and our primary hindrance at the moment, is trying to keep construction costs to a minimum so that it can still be affordable once it's completed. So we are requesting this MOU is a memorandum of understanding that allows LEAP Housing to utilize their funding to do the feasibility study, which is to do some study on demographics, do some ground studies, some utility studies, and do some determinations on whether or not it is even feasible to do, and whether or not they can keep the costs to meet those grant requirements. If it's too spendy to build, they can't do it, and we'll move on to another property. And so there was some question about some of the language in here. It speaks to the exclusivity of that once we go into this MOU, that the county would treat them as exclusive partners to not sell the property while they're doing their MOU. Our prosecuting attorney had some issue with that language, as well as the board members had some issue with that language. And meaning as a government, we have a hard time being in an exclusive contract with anybody, and this being an MOU wasn't even really a contract, but and Holly might be able to speak to this as well. There's certainly a way to, remove that language or lessen that language so that the county is assured that there's no liability to this the feasibility. At the end of their feasibility, so I think we can take care of that with the right language, and certainly between our legal and their legal, they can come up with the right language, or simply remove it altogether. Their goal is to move forward with some idea that we're committed to the project as well, without outright selling it out from underneath them while they're doing the study. Holly, would you have anything to add on to what I've said, or maybe answer the question about the exclusivity part, and then maybe allude to who LEAP is and what LEAP does, and why this is being requested?
That last part of it here, and why what?
And why are we asking for an MOU?
Oh, understood. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. So, my name is Holly Miller. I'm a workforce housing specialist with LEAP. And just for those that are not aware, LEAP is a developer of housing solutions across the state of Idaho. We started out in 2008 as a charitable organization, and then began focusing on housing in 2016. And we operate with a mission to develop and preserve affordable housing while providing empowering services that lead to greater housing stability. And we find ourselves in communities that have a real need for affordable housing. Because 48% of the total percentage of Idaho households that experience cost burden situations. So 48% of Idaho households are cost burden, and what that means is that those Idaho households are living with greater than 30% housing costs, and many of them as much as 50 or more percent. And so I think, Dan, you explained where we're at and the details of this situation quite well. We certainly come into this situation at the request of Shoshone County to try to find out what your needs are and to see if something can be done to address the affordability issue for residents. There are a variety of different models that can be used for that. You can call it workforce housing, you can call it affordable housing. The Department of Housing and Urban Development has different income classes that they utilize, and different percentages of what's called the area median income. And so the feasibility process, the MOU that's in question here, is really just a casual or informal agreement between LEAP and the Shoshone County to enter into a process of what we're going to call feasibility. And so that allows us to unlock our resources to perform funding and financial analysis, municipal and community analysis, find out what the community wants and needs, and get input from the community. We need to find out if it's constructible. Does the zoning allow for it? We need to understand what the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and potential threats are. And then, at the end of the day, we come back to the county and we present our findings. And those findings may be that there's a particular model for development that we think could be successful. Or at the end of that, we may come back and say it doesn't look like it could be possible. But this process of moving through or agreeing to that memorandum of understanding just allows us to do that research on behalf of the county. And some of those models are, I think we talked a little bit more specifically about a potential low-income tax credit project, which is a competitive process in which the actual model itself would be a multifamily building. Generally, you can use different numbers, but generally 30 to 35 seems to work well with feasibility. And we have to go through an application process in order to be accepted into that program. And essentially, tax credits are utilized to provide credits to investors who invest in a project, which allows the project to be affordable for future tenants. Those particular projects can be restricted to seniors if need be. There can be some deed restrictions on what brackets of affordability a community really thinks they need. And again, we would understand that by moving through the MOU process. If it's not a licensed project, there are other models that can be explored. There's a community land trust model in which land is held in trust, and then homes, different types of homes are built on land, and they can be rented or they can be sold for ownership. And the model for this is to target different area median income brackets so that they are affordable and they are affordable in perpetuity. And so those are two of the most successful models. But again, going through this process would allow us to explore all of the different models and to explore what your community needs and wants, and see if we can't come up with something that would be mutually beneficial for everyone. Because this is really successful projects like this absolutely require a public-private partnership and collaboration between stakeholders throughout the community. Did that answer your question, Dan?
I think so, very, very well. Thank you very much for that. Board, is there any particular questions you might have for Holly? Or is there anything else you have for me?
Yeah. One of the things that I have a concern with is all property should be sold at public auction. In order to sell at a public auction, you need to have an appraisal done. And this is we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. We don't even know what the property is worth at this time, and that's why we should get an appraisal. And I don't know how the counties, regarding leasing property, I don't know how that works. I would have to, contact our legal counsel regarding that. But right now, I'm looking at it as, it should go through public auction.
Okay. Yeah, and we would have to explore those options and find out what your legal restrictions are in the area, and that will certainly be a factor in determining which model might be successful.
Okay. And my other concern is, I don't know if Dan can answer this or not, but if we were to put a home, a multi-dwelling home or housing in that area, is the sewer system and the water system conducive of that, or would it need upgraded? the problem we look at is if it needs upgraded, then it'd be on the taxpayers, right?
It wouldn't be on the taxpayers, it would be on the developer to expand. In this particular case, there is sufficient sewer and water capability in Yellowstone Avenue through preliminary review with sewer districts and the water districts. Certainly, once a design is put in place for what is going to be needed for the facility, then you get into the engineering of capacity and flow requirements. Certainly, the main lines and the main supply lines are available. On other properties, that's not the case, and so the infrastructure costs to make those upgrades would be incredibly expensive, and then they raise the ultimate per square foot cost to the ultimate bill. So that's why we narrowed it down to this one, because at least a preliminary phone call tells us that yes, there's availability and there's capacity, and you start with that question and then you move on to the engineering. And I think I might be able to answer for Holly a little bit. The structure of ownership is part of the feasibility. So whether or not this ends up being a property for sale, or whether it ends up being a property for lease, or a private partner, a private-public partnership, is how it gets structured out in the legal sense. So that will certainly all be addressed in the feasibility of the project. And so today, the decision really has always been just to allow this entity to go forward and determine those things. No determination is being made whether you're selling, leasing, or doing anything other than allowing them to move forward. So at this point, it's all very preliminary. No public has been asked about it because we haven't got to the point of going forward and asking about what might be feasible. And so it's unfortunate that there's a fair amount of information out there that has certainly got the neighbors concerned, and we want to address those concerns as well. But we haven't got to the point of determining is this even feasible or not. And part of that feasibility is, what does the public think? What do the neighbors think about this thing being there? Part of the feasibility is a few town hall meetings and some surveys and some anticipation of what the public would want to see there. Lee and me and you and everybody here doesn't want to see a development that's not for the best of our community.
Any questions? Commissioner Hills?
Yeah, and I would just thank you for clarifying that. Yes, whether the land is sold or leased, that certainly is determined during this feasibility process. In terms of structural improvement, that is many times the responsibility of the developer, which then impacts the feasibility of the project. And as I mentioned before, public-private partnerships are important. And if we reach a point, it doesn't sound like it would be an issue, but if we reach the point where we felt like we had to do structural improvement, there are grants that are possible to apply for, like a community development block grant that could potentially fund such improvements. But so there are different resources available at our disposal to be able to address potential issues like that. And that those are things that we need to explore during that feasibility process.
Okay. I had a couple questions for Dan. Could you tell me, in this process up until now, what other locations have been considered or discussed as a possibility for this project?
We looked at a variety, but we started with the valley, and so we narrowed the focus to the central Silver Valley. We narrowed it to county-owned properties, and the two biggest ones that are the lowest hanging fruit as far as developability was this piece. There's another piece up behind Satherfield Road between the school district and behind this area that's been looked at previously. And then there's another piece out at the Smelterville, out at the end of Commerce Drive on what would be the west side of the Shoshone Medical Center. The county retains about 6 or 7 acres in the middle of that area. It's not already part of Shoshone Medical. We're leasing the property at the end of there for the porta potty facility up next to the sewer treatment plant. So those were the key developable type properties. Everything else is pretty much privately owned or not feasible. So of those 3 properties, the other 2, I'll start with the one in Smelterville. While it is large flat acreage, has access off of Commerce Drive, The cost of infrastructure costs there are going to be fairly significant in relative terms, in that development of Commerce Drive is going to have to be done. Redevelopment of the sewer line that runs across that property is going to have to be realigned to some great expense. And then in that case, there is a major sewer line and a major water line right there, so it does provide that. But the expense of that development was higher. The property in the back in Silverton is very oddly configured. The access to it is off of Satherfield Road, which is a small, narrow road that wouldn't be terribly conducive to any kind of major traffic flow. The other option would be to come off of 3rd Street in Silverton, but again, that would be not the best place to have lots of traffic, and so that would have to be determined as part of the feasibility. And that property is oddly configured in and around a large piece that's owned by the school district. And at this point, the school district has made it clear that they're not interested in developing their piece of ground, and they want to retain that for their future uses. And so we had looked at this property in conjunction with the school district about 5 years ago with Leap Housing, and that was we investigated that property and ultimately didn't even get there because the school district just wasn't interested. And that's fine; they're able to do that. So we did, look at those properties to determine are they feasible for these types of developments. But because this one has ready access to a transportation road, I don't know what the classification is for Yellowstone, but it's a major thoroughfare road. Satherfield is still a minimal road, but the access to it would be minimal. And then the access road going into the facility in the back again is an access road that meets the other requirements. So sewer and water being in the road became the lesser of evils, and because there's 2.25 acres there, it was at least the beginnings of the size requirements needed to do anything worthwhile. So that's how we narrowed to that particular property.
So Smurfville was considered, but in your opinion, the infrastructure costs would be greater?
For sure. And then, the next step was if this turns out to be not feasible, then you go look at other properties and you do the similar thing on that one. In that case, it's larger acres, the one in Smelterville. So conceivably, you'd have more units that might offset the cost. And so then the cost might be doable through you block grants and stuff like you said. There might be availability to do that. It's one more hurdle, one more set of circumstances that make that development that much harder to do. So we're picking the easiest one first.
Okay. Another issue that I think it's been addressed again today, but I'm still a little confused on it. It sounds like this could go multiple ways. In some scenarios, the county still owns the land, and in some scenarios, the county doesn't. Is that correct?
That could be correct, yes. Because one of the scenarios, they could come back and say, we've got investors that want to buy the land, or you put it up for auction. However, we got to formally give it, you do it, and then they could purchase the land and then do the development on it. Today, any developer could come in and request to purchase that property and request it to be put up for auction, and we would decide whether we're going to do that or not, and then we would go through that process for any developer to buy it.
Thank you. No further questions at this time, Mr. Chairman. Any questions?
I guess my only question, since I'm new, hello everybody. How did this process start with LEAP and Dan? Did they come to you and ask for?
No, we have worked with LEAP on other projects through the Silver Valley Economic Development Corporation, and then we have solicited help from various people like them, and then we landed with them when we were investigating some other developments a few years ago. So we just had a relationship with them. And Colleen, would you be able to speak to how other projects they work on near here? I don't think they've done anything here in the valley or here, but
they did a project in St. Mary's. Yeah, they live in Mountain Hall, and then they're working in St. Mary's.
Okay, so they've done some local projects and expressed some interest in working with us. They worked with the planner in Benoit County, and then we worked through them with the EDC. So we just knew of them, and the projects that they do seemed to be something we were interested in. So when Carol came to me to say, hey, we've got a giant need for different versions of senior care and places to live, being from assisted living to just smaller places to live, what can we do? And we said, well, we've got this opportunity. We could go look for this private-public partnership deal where we might be able to come up with a piece of property. So we started the process of looking at how the county could help with that. I had already been tasked with the idea of how do we develop some of these properties and how do we keep moving on those questions, and so this is definitely part of my already in the wheelhouse of what to do with it.
Any other further questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and start taking public comment. If you just please come up, state your name, and state the city you live in, and make your comment. You have 2 minutes, please. Anybody?
Kevin Hack. I'm old retail, and I've heard a lot of promises, and promises don't get completed after it's been built. There's security issues. There is the low income families coming in, but are they family or are they druggies? But Simon's been going through a lot of these problems, and I don't see it happening. I don't want to.
Okay, thank you.
I need to do it from here. Robin Stan, live in Silverton. Pinehurst has a park paid for by the county. Osborne has a park paid for by the county. Kellogg has a park paid for by the city. Mullen has a park paid for by the city, and Pottsville paid for by Forest Service. Wallace does not have a real park to speak of. Silverton has a football field paid for by the city and restricted with its use of that school district. And Silverton has 3 baseball fields owned by the county. There's a little league field, a minor league field, and a t-ball field, all built and maintained by volunteers and used by youth from Mullen, Wallace, Silverton, Osborne, and sometimes children from the west end of the county. Silverton doesn't have stores or gas stations. People sacrifice those services for the quality of life. As before, that quality of life is being challenged, and the future recreational sites for our youth in East Shoshone County could be jeopardized. It isn't just the children of Silverton, but the athletes from Mullen to Osborne, and occasionally those from Pinehurst and Kellogg. There isn't many baseball fields left in the Silver Valley. While serving as chairman of East Shoshone Hospital District, during the shutdown, we had several opportunities to sell or lease the facility that we turned down. We had an offer to use it for a sex offender facility, an offer to use it for the mentally ill. We had an offer to use it for violent mentally ill patients. All the uses requiring a high cyclone fence surrounding the facility. We sacrificed the money to protect the quality of life for the residents of Silverton and the opportunities for recreation for the children. The money did not warrant ruining the quality of life for the Silverton residents. Those who have been around for a while remember the Silverton Manor as the old nursing home and sometimes referred to as the pork farm. The building sat falling apart and vacant for literally decades, waiting for the county to find someone willing to buy the building and get it back on the county tax rolls. Finally, someone did. They invested their life savings to remodel it, restore the grandeur of the old nursing home. While I doubt if any of the commissioners or many people outside Silverton have been able to bask in the glory of that beautiful relit facility at night or even during the day. Now, the solvency of that facility could be jeopardized by destroying the view of the facility and the view from the facility. They purchased the building and invested in remodeling in good faith that their investment would be secure. Yet now there is consideration to relegate their investment and their beautiful historic building to a back seat, which could actually amount to a governmental taking. A similar plan was floated about 2 decades ago that I remember in several sense that have resulted in a huge uprising from the community. Not just the residents of Silverton, but parents of the valley whose children play baseball or recreate in those 3 small athletic fields. If you go down there during baseball season, there's no place to park any place in Silverton. It's packed from people from Osborne and even from the other end of the valley. In addition, there were attorneys involved when the plan was voted in the past that ended up the plans being dropped and the facility was relocated, the future facility was relocated to Silverton, which brings up my last point. There are two primary reasons older people move to Kootenai County. One is to be near their doctors and advanced medical care specialists dealing with heart care and cancer. The second reason is to be near their children and grandchildren. It stands to reason that any need for senior living would be greater where there's the most seniors living. The west end of the county has a greater population than the east end of the county. Therefore, the greatest need would be on the west end of the county. The county owns property in Silverton that is currently not being used other than being rented or leased. It is located between two of the largest communities in Shoshone County, Pinehurst and Kellogg. It is near the Walmart, the dollar store, the grocery outlet, Maverick service station, storage areas, and most importantly, the Shoshone Hospital Medical Facility building. All these are valuable assets for any future development and services seniors depend on. Silverton is lose-lose. It denies our children's future to play and recreate, but would not serve the community, our seniors, well, as it only has a post office. Silverton is a small community and could not absorb a project like this. Rest assured, Silverton residents will do anything in our power, including political and legal efforts, to thwart this project. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other comments? None? Okay. State your name, please, and your city.
My name's Theron Frank. I live at 101 West Yellowstone. I am the very first house as you come in Silverton. I see all the traffic, I see all the damage, I see all the people. The freeway right now, for the last 4 years, we've been dodging the same potholes. If we add another 50-unit house or housing development, we're going to have a massive amount of infrastructure that needs to be done that's probably not going to be pushed onto the county or be pushed onto the county afterwards. You're going to have road repair and maintenance costs. For right now, there is no police force. The county doesn't come up right now once, twice a month to patrol the area. So that's an issue. I mean, regardless if it's elderly or low income, which generally brings in other problems of its own, we're going to need an increase in police presence for that. You spoke to most all of our passionate issues, our children, our grandchildren. Once these free spaces are taken away, they're never given back. Smelterville right now is not the use area for our children. I would suspect that a 5-acre parcel would develop more units, upwards of 200 possibly, and that would increase rent and revenues for increasing the affordability of the maintenance or the increase in infrastructure that would need to be handled. Increases in sewers, increases in water. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. All right. Does the board have any more questions or any comments?
I did have a question. It sounds like this, I hear people alluding to that this issue has come up before in Silverton. Was it just the two decades ago, Robin? Is that the only, you mentioned that this came up before?
It came up, I can't remember how, but I would guess about 2 decades ago. And I can tell you the community got very well organized and strenuously adjusted. And like I say, became a legal issue, a political issue, and the community as a whole isn't going to want this in their community, and we will do everything. And I hate to dwell, but if I'm hearing the only major concerns with the Smelterville area is the cost of the sewer and the cost of the water system, that's pretty insignificant compared to the impact this can have on our community in Silverton. And the future development down in that area in Smelterville is huge. I mean, that can expand and that can grow, and you get that sewer problem taken, businesses are moving in there. That's an ideal place.
Thank you.
My name is Elizabeth Allison, and my family currently takes care of that park and that property. We were forced to put in a sprinkler system in our building, in the non-combustible part of the building, and by the county, Johnson Controls put it in and said, that there is not enough water to supply, our sprinkler system in Silverton. Also, there's an aquifer there, and then, on May 15th of this year, that property will be historic. Yeah, so you have to deal with the National Historic Society on that. I've already contacted them. They said they're willing to fight because that is one of the last stand for farms in America.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, one of the concerns I have is, I know it's a T-ball park. I know that they've been using it. We've had them come and ask, the Little League has asked to use that as an overflow for their T-ball park, to play T-ball. I know it's been used as, for recreation. That's one of the problems I have with the property as well right now is how are we going to move that to another location?
Are you open to other comments and
Yeah.
thoughts? I really like the idea of pursuing something with LEAP to see what's possible. I'm not excited at all about the Silverton setting. Smelterville, it's just personal. Smelterville makes more sense to me.
For me, I'm still learning about LEAP. I'm still learning about how it all works. I actually had to go back and watch our meeting again last night, and I have, what was told in that meeting that I missed was, there's that cost to share funding. When I ran on, trying to do things in a fiscal, way. So when I see cost sharing, I'm not sure on that. I'm confused on that. I'm not saying that that's something that would happen, but it was brought up in our meeting. So I'm still trying to learn LEAP in itself and get a better idea on that and what it looks like. Educate myself more on that. Also with Silverton, I will say my kids played t-ball, and they were on the west end, and that was the spot that they went for their practices and their games. So it would be nice, I guess, if there were other options.
Okay, this is a question for Dan. Is the Smelterville an option? Is the Smelterville property an option?
100%. So it was certainly going to be my closing argument that obviously, given the scenario and the pushback on this, is that the other option would be to not sign this MOU, but we could reconstruct a different MOU for the Smelterville property and simply refocus our efforts on development of the Smelterville property. The team of the folks from LEAP, Carol and I, and Paige, and folks from the EDC, we leaned on this as the low-hanging fruit, the easiest to develop. Certainly the public share and the public component is always that element that we don't know until we know, and then you try to surmise. So again, this was a feasibility exercise. It's fairly obvious that that part of it is a negative side of it. So certainly the suggestion here might be say no to this MOU, and we'll come back with a different MOU for the Smelterville property and request for you to sign that MOU.
Okay. One of the other concerns I have is I'm still trying to figure out how the property is sold. So I'll have to get with legal on that just to iron that out for the Smelterville property. Because we got to look at a 99-year lease. I think that carries a little liability to the county. The county has enough liability as it is, so I really would like to investigate that more. But on that note, I would entertain a motion on this MOU.
Mr. Chairman, I will move that we turn down the offer for an MOU with LEAP on this Silverton property and at the same time, we encourage Silver Valley Economic Development and LEAP to come back to us with some ideas for Snellville.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.